Okay, so we are recording this webinar, and looks like 10 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks to everybody for joining in today. Really appreciate it. My name is Rose Spidel. I work as an education ombuds with the Washington State Governor's Office of the Education Ombuds. It's a bit of a mouthful. We're also known as OEO. We're a small state agency situated in the Governor's Office, and here to help share information with families and educators and help problem solve as issues come up that impact students anywhere in our K-12 public education system. We're also charged with looking at systems and policy-wide practices that impact the opportunity gap and trying to find ways to eliminate those gaps so that all students have a chance to succeed. And today we're going to get some really critical information for some kids who we know unfortunately fall in those gaps. And I'm so pleased to have next to me our state foster care education program supervisor. This is Jess Lewis, who works at the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, so OSPI, and heads the foster care education program supervisor. Thanks, Jess, for coming up.
Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So we're going to go through a pretty quick agenda. We just have 1 hour of your time this morning. Jess is going to walk us through kind of an abbreviated version of a slideshow of PowerPoint that she's put together with some great information about federal and state laws for kids in foster care. Then we're gonna do some questions back and forth, a conversation between Jess and I, hopefully hitting many of those questions that lots of people have, and then leave some time for folks in the audience who are there to ask questions. What we'd like to do today is, if you have a question, type it in the chat box and we will go through and try to pull out some of those questions. Jess has very kindly asked if we can figure out how to capture those questions, especially the ones we aren't able to answer today, so she can try to follow up and give that information. So with that, we're going to go ahead and try to get started with the PowerPoint, but just before we share that on the screen, Jess, is there anything you want to say in welcome to everybody? I do want to say that as she goes through the PowerPoint, make sure you make note of her phone number, because there's no way there's no way you can tell us everything we need to know in an hour. Is that fair?
That's very fair. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in today. It's a pleasure to be here and to share information. If I raise any questions or you need clarification, please feel free to reach out, and we'll cover my contact information at the end of the webinar.
Great. Okay, now we're going to try to share a PowerPoint with you. We haven't every time gotten it right, so bear with us. Okay, and now let's see if that works. Let's give it a moment. I think we're going to need to try a new share. Try a different one. We get the PowerPoint up, but then unfortunately, it doesn't move with us. So just a moment. Let's try that one. Oh, can we try the PowerPoint slideshow actually again? That's the one you just tried. Okay. Sure. No, I think it's let's try that one. Sorry. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, great.
It moves.
All right, Jess, the clicker is yours.
Thank you.
Walk us through some beginning stuff.
So the first thing I think it's important to do is really talk about eligibility, because in Washington State, as in every other state in the country, we have official foster care situations, and we also have that unofficial foster care that's really designed to, well, it's just kind of what families do, right? And we see that all the time. Grandma and grandpa, aunt and uncle will take in a kid who can't be at home for safety purposes or because the parents just aren't able to care for them. And so those kids never officially enter the system, but the family has figured out how to make alternative arrangements for the kiddo. So the students that were,
okay,
sorry, technical difficulty.
We're just switching the view. Stephanie, let me get that for you. So I think you can keep sharing with us.
Okay.
And we'll get the view right here.
Sorry, I got distracted. So for the students that we're talking about kids who are in the care and placement authority of Children's Administration. Ooh, that's much better, it's bigger. Children's Administration, and it means 24-hour per day temporary substitute care away from parents. The key with this definition is that really Children's Administration has to be acting as guardian, right? So they have the care and placement authority. This includes kids who are in any kind of out-of-home care. So we have a lot of different arrangements that could occur in our state. We have suitable others, we have relatives. Each of the kids in foster care who are eligible for the services that we're talking about will come with a court order that says that they're dependents of Washington State.
Okay. All right. All right.
So in our state, we've tried to come up with a system of identification that relieves the burden on school districts and on caregivers to self-identify. And so we have a data sharing agreement currently with Children's Administration that allows DSHS, it's actually through Economic Services, they share data through a nightly data feed with OSPI, and then OSPI pushes that information out through CEDARS. The important thing to know is that we're fine-tuning the data share, so it's not perfect. We're getting closer as we figure out what data points really help us best match kids. As that improves, I think will relieve the burden on school district staff as well for needing to verify status. What districts should not do is deny services because a student is not on the list, because there could be a lag in the amount of time that it takes the student to get on in the system, or we might have missed it, because if a name is misspelled at DSHS and we try to match it in our system, sometimes we have difficulty even though we'll get name and date of birth. So just know that if someone comes to you as a school district foster care liaison potentially and says we need services for our kid, the list is the place to start, but it's not the end all be all for that verification process. You can verify with the caseworker. The caregiver may have paperwork to show you saying that the student is in care, and you can also call the education lead in your region and they can verify the student status if they have name and date of birth.
Great.
I'm going to, so the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which was passed in 2000, no, it was not, it was 1965, my apologies, was reauthorized by the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015. And it was signed December 10th. And I know that because it becomes important to our discussion, but essentially the Every Student Succeeds Act did a couple of things that are important for kids in foster care. One is it removed awaiting foster care from the definition of McKinney-Vento. At the same time, it moved foster care protections into Title I, Part A. So that's important to know as we start talking about the federal protections for kids in foster care, because sometimes people only hear they're no longer homeless, but they don't hear the second part that, oh wait, we have this other suite of services that we're now required to provide. So school of origin, kids in foster care, all students in foster care, not just those awaiting foster care, have the right to remain in their school of origin for the entire time they're in foster care. The school of origin is the school the child was enrolled in at the time of placement into foster care. So if I go to a middle school in my neighborhood and I'm put into foster care, but my placement takes me outside my community, I still have the right to remain in that school. Super similar to McKinney-Vento. The state education agency and school districts need to ensure that students in foster care enroll in or remain in his or her school of origin unless a determination is made that it's not in the student's best interest. So basically what that means is that we need to use child-centered criteria to decide, does it make sense for the student to stay in their school of origin? At the time of placement, the school district should consult the caseworker, probably ideally, to have a conversation about what's in the student's best interest. The caseworker has information about the permanency plan and health and safety issues that may be related to that student remaining in their school. And the school district foster care liaison can really help inform the school side of things. You know, is the kid engaged? Do they need to remain there? Do they have, is it beneficial to their social emotional well-being to remain attached to that particular community? And so they really need to collaborate to make that determination. If a foster student's placement changes and they change schools as a result, so let's say the foster placement originally occurred in Aberdeen and the student now attends or is moved to Olympia and it's determined not to be in their best interest to go that far, then the Olympia school district and the school they attend would be considered their school of origin.
Okay.
So here we are with that best interest decision making. So school districts, like I said, need to work with local child welfare agencies. And really that's to develop clear protocol on how that's going to happen. Decisions must be, it says should be, but they must be child-centered. So we're looking at the impact on the kid, right? So transportation can be considered when you're considering best interest, but it's not in the way that it inconveniences grown-ups. It's about what kind of impact does that transportation have on the student. So I had 2 boys in my home, and one of them I could put on a bus for a long period of time, and the other one not even like 5.2 seconds because it was just a bad idea. And so every kid is different, and they were only a year apart. So it's important to consider those things. There's no district line, no county line, no state line, no mileage limit. Let me say that again. There's no district line, county line, state line, or mileage limit. So you shouldn't be hearing, oh, well, that's in the next county, we don't go there. Or, oh, we don't transport over district lines. Or Spokane School District has a kid who's placed in Idaho. Like there are no artificial or man-made lines that are applicable to this situation. So the school district needs to ensure that kids remain in their school of origin while a determination of best interest is being made. So even if a school district is having difficulty getting a hold of folks, that kid should never know that there's a conflict between when making the determination of best interest. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied. So they shouldn't know that their grown-ups don't have their stuff together, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So the kid needs to receive services while a determination is being made. If there's a disagreement over best interest, then we have a state-level dispute process that either party can initiate. Also, if there is a dispute, we need to make sure that kids are receiving services while the dispute's occurring. And this burden is on school districts. So even if it's a dispute over cost sharing, the burden is on school districts because it's really the only way as a state agency we can ensure that we're in compliance until we decide we're not, right? So the school district should provide the service. So transportation, and I apologize that the slides are so wordy, but I like to give specific language from the law, particularly when we're so new to things. So the law says that a school district receiving Title I Part A funds, we have 285 in our district, although we have school stability provisions in state law as well, so all 295 of our school districts are on the hook. They need to collaborate with Children's Administration or another supervising agency, because we have other agencies that contract with Children's Administration to do the child placement piece of child welfare, to ensure that transportation for children in foster care is provided, arranged, and funded. So I'm working in collaboration with Children's Administration to develop a duly vetted memorandum of understanding that we can offer as a template to school districts and Children's Administration staff. And it takes care of that mandate. For school district folks, if you don't have written transportation procedures currently, relax a little bit. We're not there yet. And I would be the one telling you that you need them. So you do need to be working in collaboration with Children's Administration now. But if you don't have a formal document that's been approved by your district leadership or Children's Administration leadership, relax a little bit, it's okay. So these procedures must ensure that children in foster care needing transportation to their school of origin will promptly receive that transportation in a cost-effective manner. School districts find this language about cost-effective manner really weird because we don't have that anywhere in education law prior to reauthorization. Cost-effective manner comes from the Social Security Act, and it ensures that school districts aren't creating cost barriers for Children's Administration participation in providing transportation. If there are additional costs, this sentence is very important. So if there are additional costs incurred in providing transportation to school of origin, the school district will provide such transportation if. So that sentence alone tells us two things. One, if there are no additional costs, the district is compelled by federal law to provide transportation to school of origin if it's in the student's best interest. It also tells us that if there are additional costs, a school district has to collaborate and provide that transportation if the three conditions below are met. So the child welfare agency agrees to reimburse the school district for the cost of such transportation. So CA comes to you and says, hey, if you do it, we'll pay you for it, right? The school district agrees to pay the cost. When I was a McKinney-Vento liaison, we did this for all of our kids in foster care. We only had 13 in my small district, and so we just figured they're coming back, so we'll just go and get them in the meantime. C is the school district and Children's Administration agree to share the cost. Again, districts must provide transportation while disputes are being resolved. So if the dispute is resolved regarding cost, then you need to make sure that you are providing transportation, and either the school district or Children's Administration can initiate the dispute process. If you look at the last page, there's an expedited process for interagency disputes, and that comes directly to OSPI, and Children's Administration staff and myself both look at that to resolve it. Do you want me to ignore the question?
Yeah, let's minimize that so we don't get distracted, and we'll look at those questions as soon as we get through the overview.
I can't go forward.
Oops. What happened here? Can you move us forward from the, you move us to the next slide, Stephanie? Just down on the bottom. There we go.
There we go. So immediate enrollment, if it's determined that it's not in the best interest of a child to remain in their school of origin, then the receiving school district needs to enroll a student immediately. The law does not define what immediate means, but any good lawyer will tell you that in the absence of a definition, you go to Webster's. And Webster says without delay. So every kid is different, so there could be a kind of extenuating circumstances, but the standard is that the district will not delay enrollment and that they're practicing due diligence to get that kid in school. What I will say is that enrollment cannot be denied or delayed because documents normally required for enrollment are missing. That includes immunizations, that includes health plans. So if your kid has a chronic health condition, even if they don't have doctor's orders saying this is what you do if this happens, the student needs to be in school. And you would then work with the caseworker to get those plans in place as quickly as possible. It's also absence of things like an EpiPen or anything like that. The theory being that, well, not the theory, the reality is that a student is safer in school than not in school, right? So this is true for homeless students as well. We want kids in school where there are grown-ups available who can call 911 if there's an incident or an issue. We also, just to kind of put it in perspective, if I had kids and one of them had a chronic health condition and the school was supposed to enroll them but chose not to, and they were with me in my car or at a DSHS office or someplace other than school, and something happened to that child, I don't think the school really gets out of liability by not having the kid there, right? So make sure that you enroll. The enrolling school also needs to immediately contact a child's school of origin to obtain relevant records and documentation. So you can call the school that the kid came from. You don't have to have paper records in hand, and you can say, hey, does this student have an IEP? What services were you providing? And that should be substantive enough for you to get the student enrolled and start providing services. In the meantime, you can wait for the records, or you can initiate an IEP reeval if that's what you need to do. Some kids bounce around so much that it's really difficult to track down records. When my boys came to stay with me, they had been to so many schools that we literally had to sit in front of a computer screen, and I showed them the front of the buildings for the schools in their community, and they were able to identify the front of the school, but they couldn't remember the name of the school because they had been to so many. So, you know, they bounce around a lot. Their records might be difficult to track down. Make sure they're in school and actively participating. And enrollment is defined as attending and also actively participating in school activities. So enrollment means sports and chess and choir and band. And so the school needs to facilitate access to all of those school-based activities as part of their enrollment requirements.
Okay. Oops. There we go.
So students in foster care have categorical eligibility for Title I. They also have categorical eligibility for free meals, and we have a direct certification process through OSPI, actually using the same data set that we use to generate the foster care flag, where we certify kids. You might have a kid come in, maybe they came into care recently and the system hasn't quite caught up to them being there, or maybe they've enrolled. The foster care liaison or their designee should be able to tell child nutrition that they qualify and get them started immediately on free meals. So categorical eligibility for Title I means that the student doesn't need to meet other eligibility criteria, so they don't have to score below standard. They also don't have to attend a Title I school, and they don't have to be served in traditional Title I areas. So you could have a student who is an advanced placement history student, for example, who is doing fine. They come into foster care and their grades start to slip. The school district under Title I Part A could provide tutoring services for that student to stop the backhill slide as a result of their foster care placement. It is up to the school district to determine if Title I services are appropriate. Community service providers and other agencies should not be paying for tutoring, right? It's our job to educate, so we should be taking care of that. And Title I is one funding source where that can happen. They can also use the Learning Assistance Program, LAP funds for credit retrieval and those kinds of things. The There are some funding limitations because we have this other state system that has some requirements about what to do for kids, right? So unlike homeless students, foster kids have a system behind them that should take care of their basic needs. So medical care, food, clothing, shelter, right? So if a student is struggling with that, or those kinds of things, you want to make sure that you contact the caseworker and ask them to work on resolving those issues. You can use Title I funds if you've reached out to the caseworker and they're non-responsive, or you can't get what you need for the kid soon enough, but that should be a last resort. DSHS, Children's Administration, is required to pay fines and fees for students in foster care when they come into care. So if you have a student in foster care who has fines and fees, you can't hold on to their records, right? We have to transfer those records. We can't punish the kid academically for having fines and fees, but you can reach out to the caseworker or the education lead to have them pay those fines and fees. You cannot use Title I money to pay those because there's a state source that's supposed to take care of them, and the Children's Administration is required by law to do so. And well, I think we cover that a little bit later. That's it. If you have questions about Title I, please feel free to ask. So state laws, as they relate to kids in foster care, really support the federal implementation. And typically I do this presentation kind of flip-flopped because our state law came first. But they really are helping make the case for good implementation. And our state law actually goes a little bit further to support students in foster care. When I was hired for this job, I was told that actually the first line of the bill that funds my position mandates that I help make Washington State #1 in the nation for outcomes for kids in foster care.
Great goal.
It's a goal. It's a little bit scary and a little bit intimidating, but I take it very seriously. And I believe wholeheartedly, really, that the provisions that we have, if we implement effectively, can actually help us reach that goal.
You advance us 670.
So our first state law that we're going to cover is for school districts, and it's around enrollment and attendance. So we've always, well, not always, but for quite a while, we've had a state law that says we can't deny or delay enrollment for kids in foster care. We were always supposed to be enrolling immediately. It wasn't until the federal provisions that we went, we should probably really do that. And it requires school districts to retrieve school records or educational history within 2 business days of that kid's enrollment. So this really is in line with the federal mandate of immediate. School districts are also supposed to review unexpected or excessive absences and support schoolwork. So it requires districts to monitor the unexpected or excessive absences of dependent youth. And you'll notice it doesn't say why. So it doesn't matter if the kid is skipping school or they're being pulled out constantly because they have requirements to meet for the courts, visitation, those kinds of things. It just says if they're unexpected or excessive, the school district needs to proactively support this youth's schoolwork so the student does not fall behind and avoid suspension and expulsion based on truancy. So we already have a discipline law that was passed last year that limits suspensions and expulsions due to discretionary discipline purposes. And truancy kind of falls in that bucket. But it does say that schools need to proactively support kids so that they don't fall behind academically. And what that means is that this is one situation in which your teachers really can't say, I'm not going to accept late work, or I'm not going to give you a homework packet so that you can make up for your lost work. And there's no qualifying reason for the absence. So our kids struggle in school because they come by it honestly, right? They've experienced tremendous amounts of trauma. When my boys came to stay with me, they were in my school on Saturday and I had them enrolled in attending school on Monday. And it wasn't until much later that I realized how brave they were for, like, they just must have been terrified. And so It's really important to recognize that kids are doing the best that they can under very adverse circumstances and facilitate the on-time grade level progression. DSHS has the right to student records under state and federal law, so you want to make sure that you're transmitting student records to DSHS. They need that for case planning, which you really want them to consider the student's academic placement and how they're doing in school when they're doing case planning. For a long time, we've completely ignored education in the lives of kids, even though they spend 8 hours a day with us. And so we want to really promote access to education and the fact that they're considering that these kids are actually students in that planning. They also need it for court reporting. It's a significant part of the dependency case, so you want to make sure. Also, if Children's Administration, particularly Child Protective Services, is doing an investigation, we have a state law, and I apologize it's not on here, that says that school districts must, here's what it says. What it says is any mandated reporter in possession of records that pertain to the child are required to release those records. School district staff are mandated reporters, and so Child Protective Service investigators have the right to student records as well. They only request them if they're pertinent. So if there's excessive absence or they're concerned about school-based services. So just make sure that you're doing that and you're not impeding a Child Protective Services investigation. Also, if the parent is subject to that investigation, the parent under FERPA exceptions does not need to be notified that those records were released. Children's Administration, staff, or law enforcement have the duty under state law to determine if the parent should be notified. Please, as school district staff, do not call the parent to let them know that you've released student records to CPS, because you don't know if you're putting that kid in a dangerous situation by doing so. So schools are also required to facilitate the on-time grade level progression and graduation for kids in foster care. It requires school districts to facilitate this process by having kind of a suite of services. One thing that they can do is they can waive specific courses if similar coursework has been completed in another district. So let's say you have a kid who's here on Interstate Compact from California. Shockingly, they don't offer Washington State history in California. I think that's crazy. I think they should do it, but they don't. So if a student has taken a comparable course, a Washington State school could say, look, you've pretty much done the same thing, just on the wrong state, so we're going to give you the credit. They can provide an alternative means to complete required coursework. So this could be online learning. This could be having the student in a partially alternative school, partially regular school. Regular school is not the right word, but it's the only thing I can come up with. What you don't want to do is push kids into online learning or alternative learning experiences in lieu of providing a brick and mortar education, right? You want to make sure that you're not automatically kicking these kids out of their school of origin because they're credit deficient. So you want to work within that environment to see how you can supplement their options. You can consolidate unresolved coursework and provide opportunities for credit accrual. So a school district right now under this provision has the opportunity to say, look, you were in that class in the other district for 3 months or for a month and you have a B coming in. So we're going to honor that B and we're going to let you start and accrue credit. What schools should not do is tell students, well, you can enroll, but you're not going to get any credit for this, right? So if a kid comes with 3 weeks left of class, the likelihood that they're actually going to be engaged in school when they can't earn credit is pretty unreasonable. I liken it to people asking me to go to work without getting paid. Like, oh, you can come to work, but we're not going to pay you for it. I'm probably going to stay home, quite frankly. I got fishing. I can do lots of other things. So It's unreasonable to think that kids aren't going to make those same decisions, right? And so you want to make sure that kids are actively engaged and are getting paid for the work that they're doing. You can also facilitate graduation from the sending district where graduation requirements have been met. This is really important for the kid that might transfer 2 months before their senior year ends. And they haven't met your exact graduation requirements, but they've met the requirements in the district that they were attending last. So you don't want to penalize them by saying you can't graduate, sorry, because that's also a condition in which you're going to create a dropout. So just some resources that are available to you. This is the front page of my website, and it's in the process of being built out, right? So as I do things, I'm trying to add them. It's been busy with trainings and things like that, but hopefully you find some helpful stuff. So right here is where you can sign up for a Gov Delivery newsletter that's all about foster care. So anything that goes out to school district staff, I also send out in a Gov Delivery newsletter so that everyone in the field can get it at the same time the school does. You're also all getting the same information. So while interpretation can vary, at least we have the same document to refer to. So I try really hard to be consistent with that. This is where you can find a list of foster care liaisons in our state, as well as the DSHS regional contacts. DSHS does everything by region or by zip code. And so you'll have to look at the DSHS contact list, look for your county, and then you can find your person. There's only 4 of them, so it's not that long of a list. This frequently asked questions tab, I've been trying unsuccessfully to get it called something else. It's really where the resources are, but there's an FAQ document on that site, but really there's also a guide to school selection. The dispute resolution process is there, so it's where I put all of the documents that we create. This is also where the sample MOU will be, and any other processes that we develop as a state. I'm really trying to do as much at the state level as I can so that districts aren't having to recreate the wheel. 295 versions of the same thing is a little bit hard to manage, and it's unfair to the field, in my opinion. This is my contact information, and this is my direct information. Also on the right, there's that little bubble, and it says questions, and there's fostercare@k12.wa.us. While you can reach me directly through my email, it would be awesome if you would email the foster care inbox, because we have a tracking mechanism to determine what areas we need to provide more technical assistance in, what are the biggest issues, and it's just very helpful. This is the Gov Delivery newsletter. Don't forget to sign up. This is the foster care liaison list, and this arrow points to the update your liaison contact information. Don't update your friend's contact information to be funny. It's something I would have done when I was much younger, but don't do it. You can go in and update your own district contact information. We update the list every Thursday. Right now, there's a lot of kind of ebb and flow in our list because people were assigned the position and then they went, whoa, there's a lot to do, and so they're reassigning pretty consistently. So every Thursday that will be updated. If you submit on a Monday and you go on Wednesday and your contact information is still there, please don't freak out. We'll get to it on Thursday. So this is the map. So I'm working with a woman in our transportation department to develop an interactive state map for resources for kids in foster care. So if you look at it, you'll see that the different colors represent different regions, and each of those dots is a foster care liaison. So if you click on a school district or on a dot or on a region, what will happen is you'll get that white pop-up box, and it will have all of the resources that we're currently aware of in that area that pertain to kids in foster care. So if you have independent living services, setup providers, treehouse advocates, either education advocates or a grad success program. The foster care liaison information will be on there. So we're trying to consolidate those so you don't have to hunt and peck so much. This is the FAQ. It's a 21-page document we developed in the beginning before guidance came out, and thankfully we guessed right. So it actually hasn't been updated, but it was developed in collaboration with the different departments that are represented. So you know that the information and the guidance is actually accurate. So when you go to the Title I section, that section was developed with Paula Moore, the director of Title I. So their information is consistent with what is in here. The guide to school selection, for those of you who have done McKinney-Vento, this will look really familiar. I also try to steal as much as I can from people who've already developed things. So there's kind of the rationale, and then Children's Administration and school districts have agreed that this list is probably the best way to determine best interest for a student. And so, and it's considered best practice in McKinney-Vento for a long time. So this is a tool that you can use to guide discussions with Children's Administration. The dispute process, there's a flow chart regarding timelines and the actual text of the dispute. The timelines are identical to the McKinney-Vento timelines. We did that because we knew that there would be a lot of overlap in districts between the McKinney-Vento liaison and the foster care liaison. So we, again, as often as we can offer one process to accomplish multiple things, we're trying to do that. And there's a couple nuance differences in the policy, so you should actually read it and become familiar with it. There's different partners that you need to invite to the table, although the timelines are the same. The last page, like I said before, is the interagency dispute process, and I did tweak that enough to make sure that school districts or Children's Administration could initiate a dispute. So neither side is kind of dragging their feet. And we expedited that process as much as possible. I also included Children's Administration in the resolution process so that, because I'm not the boss of Children's Administration, right? So it provides us someone in each system to be able to advocate effectively. And then I can just mention that the Treehouse actually had a grant from the Stewart Foundation to produce the Educator's Guide to Supporting Students in Foster Care. It was published right before reauthorization took effect, but it was vetted by OSPI, Children's Administration, and I believe the Washington Student Achievement Council. And so we all kind of collaborated to be as thorough as possible. And then this is my contact information.
Fabulous. Wow, that's so much information. So I think we're gonna bring back to our screen, and I'm looking at the clock and I'm realizing there's so much information.
Yes,
I'm gonna try to stick myself to just one or two questions, because I do want us to be able to take a look at those questions in the chat box, and I see we have a couple in the Q&A section. And while our folks who are here in the background helping us look at those questions and pull them up, I'm going to ask you something just on that educator guide that was there. I have to tell you, I looked at that, found it recently, and there was a section in it talking about who's involved. So in these situations, you've mentioned schools have to send records to DSHS, so social workers, caseworkers. There's information that foster parents generally have the authority to make kind of routine educational decisions, right? Excuse an absence or sign them up for a club or various other things. I've read that for kids in older grades, 6 through 12, a court sometimes will appoint what's called an educational liaison, kind of responsible for being that point person. And that even could be a birth parent if their educational rights had not been restricted and there weren't other reasons. And then we know the special ed rules have a definition for parent, and that it says specifically a caseworker should not be the parent for special ed or the social worker, but it could be a foster parent or it could be a birth parent, again, depending on the circumstances. And then there might be other folks involved. We might have a treehouse education advocate. We might have an attorney for the child. There might be a CASA, child appointed special advocate, or a GAL, a guardian ad litem. And the school district educational liaison, foster care, and then you mentioned the educational lead for children's. That's a lot of adults.
Yes.
Number one,
Yes.
I will just say, are there some, like, let's say I am a school principal, a teacher, I'm the education foster care liaison with the district. Is there a particular form to look at, some quick reference to say, who's this person's name and their phone number, and how do I get in touch with them that I want to call for different things?
So what I would recommend is if you're a principal or counselor or district staff, you should contact your foster care liaison first, because that person is really who we're focusing and targeting for technical assistance and trying to teach kind of how to navigate the system. Sorry, I know I'm on video, but I don't like it, so I'm not looking that direction. So that's the first stop, as the foster care liaison, because they should, and that person knows how to contact me, so they can also ask me, like, how do I track this down? There's a state law that requires Children's Administration to notify a school district every time a student goes into care and changes placement and exits care. That doesn't always happen. They're working on a system to kind of streamline that. So if that's occurring, then that form, the school notification form, would have that information on it. We're also in a situation where we have a really difficult time retaining social workers currently, for lots of reasons. And so the caseworker can change often for kids sometimes. So what I would recommend is ask for a school notification form. If you don't have one or you can't find one, then I would go to your education lead next, and they're going to refer you back to the caseworker. But the nice thing is that they can actually look up who that caseworker is. And then I would use the caseworker to negotiate all of those other people, because that's really kind of what they're supposed to wrap their arms around. Foster parents can act as parents, so they can sign IEPs, they can sign 504s, they can make daily educational decisions, they can say, yes, my kid can go on a field trip. So they're kind of the go-to, just like any other parent would be. You just kind of have this extra layer for bigger decisions, and for coordinating services. So the caregiver too, either the foster parent or the relative, should also know who the assigned caseworker is for the student. So you could go to them and ask them as well.
Okay, and we have had questions come up. So it seems like quite often, so you've identified your school district foster care liaison is going to be a key point person, because the caseworker will be too, but if there's turnover or confusion, the DSHS Children's Administration has those regional educational lead people, and their contact information is on your site as well. And the foster care liaison is probably going to have their phone number on the emergency dial.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So we've got good folks. And then we know that there are some number of situations where a birth parent stays involved to some degree, right? They may be engaged. And so let's say I'm a principal and I get a call from the birth mother who says, I do think we need to set up an IEP meeting for this child. I might feel a little uncomfortable. I know this child's in foster care. Maybe I've been talking with the foster parent about the recent issues going on in classroom. So what do I say to that birth parent? Or if I just don't know, is this birth parent legitimately still involved? Who would I ask, or what should I do there?
So the first thing to do, the school should assume that the parent retains their rights under FERPA. and access to this IEP process and those kinds of things, unless they're told otherwise. And they can ask the caseworker. The caregiver will not know that information. The caregiver can have all kinds of information about the kid, but they can't have information about the parent. But in most cases, educational decision-making authority has not been terminated unless parental rights have been terminated.
Oh, in most cases?
In most cases.
Okay.
And so it's almost like working with a divorced family.
Okay.
Right? So you want to make sure that the biological parent has access to the process, just as you would the caregiver. The caregiver lives with that student day to day and is responsible for day-to-day decision-making. So you want to kind of loop them in, but you also want to make sure that you keep that biological parent in the loop.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And we are getting some questions. I'm going to take a quick, easy one. Will we have access to the PowerPoint? Yes. We're going to upload that with the webinar afterwards. Thank you for the easy question.
And on my website, on that frequently asked questions tab,
yes.
My hope is to do a training suite for folks in the field, both about children's administration processes and accessing education for a wide range of audiences. I just haven't gotten there yet. So I am building that out. We also, all of our PowerPoints need to be transcribed, so it takes me a little bit longer to get them up online, but I am working on it.
Right, and in PowerPoints and webinars, so that someone who wasn't able to listen to this could go on and read the
Correct.
Transcript of our conversation. Thanks. So we do have a question here. My school counselor and I are just wanting to clarify that students, regardless of age, must receive title or LAP academic supports regardless if they're meeting standards. Did we understand that correctly?
You did understand that correctly.
Yeah.
I would put the caveat if they need them, right?
Okay.
So most kids don't want tutoring if they don't need tutoring. So you don't want to kind of force them into that. But under the categorical eligibility for Title I, students do not need to qualify under other measures. So they can be at standard. They can, they don't have to. The example of the AP history student is one that I kind of lean on, because you wouldn't put that kid in a remedial reading class,
right,
if that's the Title I service you offer. The student has the right to Title I services, and the district is really required to determine what that kid needs and provide that service based on the need of the student. It's very individualized.
And that might be a bit of trying to be flexible and creative, and could it be something like, who's going to be the best tutor for that AP history student? Would it be maybe the teacher? Could they figure out a way to help support the teacher if the teacher were willing? I mean, I don't want to step out, but it seems like because they're saying we could use things that aren't already set up as a program, that's kind of hard sometimes to pull pieces together that weren't there in place.
Yes, districts should have, though, about 20 years of practice.
Yes.
Because it's the same requirement that is under McKinney-Vento, all McKinney-Vento students. And we have almost now 40,000 identified McKinney-Vento students in a given year. And so school districts should have that flexibility built into their systems by now.
Okay, so one more example. Let's say a middle school kid, and maybe it's a student who has been doing pretty well on their statewide assessments, kind of meeting standard there in reading, writing, and math. But you use the example of AP history. Let's say they've been taking also in science, and they're struggling, and maybe they're struggling because they've missed some school in between, or maybe they're struggling because they're having a real hard time staying focused in the midst of the traumatic separation. Would that be a time too you could maybe offer tutoring?
Absolutely.
There? Okay.
Absolutely. I also heard from actually a treehouse advocate who's working with a young woman, and she's ready to graduate, but she hasn't passed Civics.
Oh.
Civics is not a class that's typically covered under Title I tutoring provisions. However, Civics is her barrier to graduation, and so the district can and should offer tutoring services to help the student progress academically, even though it's not in a kind of a traditional reading or writing.
Okay. Great.
class.
That's helpful. We have a question here about a records request and whether it could identify the student as a foster care student in order to assist with the transfer of records. So in other words, I am in a district and I get a student who's I know is in foster care and they're coming from a district, let's say on the other side of the mountains. I need to request their records. Can I tell that district I'm asking for these and I need them right away because the child is in foster care? Is it okay to give that bit of information, the fact that the child's in foster care and that's why I need them right away? Any cautions?
I think you could. You want to make sure that you're not unnecessarily breaching a student's confidentiality, but if you need to help the district understand why they would need to release records, for example, when the student has fines or fees, then I think that it's fine to say the student qualifies because they're in foster care, you need to send them.
Okay. And you know, that reminds me of a question I had too, which is that in some of the materials I saw, one, you want to get the information to the people who need to know so they can support the kid. But it is something that we have to be so conscientious about, being careful about not disclosing beyond what needs to know. And I saw something about best practices even at front desks, right? Let's say if you have recently had a child join you in your care and you go down to the school, the reception area the next day to get them signed up, and you want to talk to them about enrollment, are there ways that we can work with, or that maybe schools already are working with their front desk folks to say, oh, you know, if you start to hear these things or these things come up, invite the family to a private area so you don't have to have them disclose right there in the front desk, I'm a foster parent and this child just entered foster care. What are some things you've seen done or heard about that work well?
Typically, the caregiver will say, I'm the foster parent or I'm the caregiver. Those are two clear words, right?
Yeah.
Where you, and at that point, it should trigger one, immediate enrollment, right? So the kid doesn't have to wait until beginning of semester or anything like that. But also, we do have some folks that tend to overshare information. And so I think developing some good boundaries about being able to say, you know, I don't really need to know that. You know, we can get you going and you can contact our foster care liaison if you'd like to share more information or if you need additional supports. Okay. I think, and also, you know, kids may need school-based counseling services or those kinds of things. And so directing them to whoever in your building does that may be a reasonable thing. It's sometimes hard to gracefully say, you know what, you're kind of oversharing, but sometimes that happens and it's okay to say, you know, we're good.
This is what we need for now, and that's right. Important information. Exactly. And I want to connect you with the person who can help you work through that and those issues associated. All right, so we have just 2 minutes left, and we're going to see if we have some really helpful things. We have someone making note that districts and foster care liaisons might be interested to know the state partners with organizations to recruit foster families. You know, I've definitely seen school districts engaging with that effort because schools, as much as anyone, sees the kids and the needs for kids, right?
Correct. And I didn't mention something which I need to. Okay. Washington State has a unique funding formula for transportation, and I apologize for leaving this out on the transportation slide, but it just occurred to me. So there are about 122 school districts in our state that receive 100% of their transportation funded. That includes homeless and foster care transportation if it's billed to Program 99, and those are direct expenditures. They're not, it's not based on ridership. So it doesn't have to be a yellow bus. It could be a cab, an Orca pass, anything like that. So in 122 of our school districts, there are no additional costs. Okay. In other school districts, they may have additional costs, and those are the folks that need to go and really actively seek that collaborative relationship with DSHS and Children's Administration to see how you're going to work that out.
Great. Jess, we have at least 3 or 4 more questions here on the table that I'm dying to ask you, and I won't be able to because I'm looking at our clock and I know we're running out of time. we're keeping note of these questions. And again, I know folks, if we didn't get to your question, if you have other questions, please remember Jess's phone number and the page on the OSPI Foster Care Education website. The phone number is 360-725-6505. Just Google OSPI Foster Care. Her page will pop right up. We know questions will continue to come. There's a question about dispute resolution. We have things there. You know, I just want to say thanks so much for giving your time. And I can see this as a personal thing and also a professional goal. And I think it's fair to say that certainly everyone here, and I am going to assume on behalf of everyone tuning in, that we all want to share that goal of being the best that we possibly can be to support kids in foster care. You know, one thing in that Educator's Guide, it has a section about, you know, even as we're working to take down barriers and address needs, to remember to celebrate the strengths of students in foster care. Do you have one or two little tidbits as you say goodbye and sign us off on celebrating the strengths of kids in foster care, or the strength of the collaboration of all these different adults working together to help them?
I think it's important to remember that everybody's coming from a place of good intention and that we really want to help kids. It's just that our different systems approach that work in different ways. And our kids are just crazy resilient. Like they just, my ambition is really to accomplish the goal the legislature set for us, but also to allow kids to do what other kids do without grown-ups getting in the way, right? My goal is to get grown-ups in line so that our kids can be successful because that's what they do, and not despite us.
Wonderful.
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
If you have an opportunity, I would encourage you to talk with some kids, hear their stories, and not in a weird, intrusive way, but you'll be kind of amazed at what we ask of them and what they're able to accomplish.
Excellent. Thanks again, Jess.
Thank you.
And we will sign off. Thank you so much. Watch for the notice of where you can find the recording. All right.